Hey, beautiful soul. You're listening to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast, your weekly dose of fertility wisdom. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. I'm a barefoot mama bear, pharmacist, and integrative fertility coach. This is your go-to podcast for all things to naturally nourish your fertility, embody womb healing, and reclaim your feminine power to accelerate your path to pregnancy. My expert guests and I will be having intentional conversations to discuss the many facets of a thriving, fertile foundation, natural wellness, and how we grow and transform as women on our journey to motherhood. So let's dive in, shall we? Hello and welcome to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. In this episode, I'll be talking with Lauren Dionysius. She is a former RN and now baby soul communicator who helps women to connect with their baby's soul to understand their journey more deeply from preconception to early childhood, including loss. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the role that babies play in their own conception, as it's more than meets the eye because they have their own journey as well that often we don't think about. So welcome, Lauren. I'm super excited for our conversation today. This is a completely new topic for the podcast, so I know that the listeners are in for a treat.
Thank you so much for having me, Katie. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so I would love to hear your perspective and your expertise. What does a baby's journey look like? What are they needing for their trip earthside with their parents? What does that look like? This might be a new concept for a lot of the listeners.
Sure. So it is very different for each baby, just like it is or was for us, right? We all came to Earth with some sort of plan, a little bit of a map, I guess, for our life ahead. And we also came for a bigger reason or a bigger purpose that extended well beyond our family of origin. So we didn't just come to Earth because our parents wanted us or wanted to expand their family. We came with a much, deeper or bigger vision for our life. And in my experience, the same is true for babies coming to Earth. There's so much that they take into consideration for their journey. And again, it's very different for each baby in each situation, but they're very energy sensitive. So they're very, well, a lot of them are anyway, very, I want to say like fussy or particular about the energy of conception. So what's going on in the world, what's going on, say, in a relationship between parents, what's going on with older siblings, if there are older siblings, and other things as well. You can stretch the mind further and get into astrology and numerology and that sort of thing as well. And they do consider all of those and try to make a bit of a plan about, well, what do I need for my life here? And what's happening more and more is that today's children who are coming to Earth are wanting space. And so while it can still happen, it's becoming less frequent that babies are coming to Earth and then 12 months later, parents are like, okay, let's try again. Next child's coming along, let's go. And the number of women I work with that try for their child is 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, even 3 years sometimes, and no baby. And when we tune in, it's like that 3-year-old or 2-year-old, or sometimes even 4 and 5-year-olds are like, no, I need some time here on Earth first as an only child to get used to the Earth, get used to being a little human before a sibling can come along. And so that then can be, without that knowledge, that can be really frustrating sometimes for parents that are trying to conceive, and say baby number 2, baby number 3, etc., are just not coming. And what I find, like with that journey to Earth, is that souls are very respectful of each other's journey. And so If your 3-year-old is, no, I need 5 years here on earth first, like any incoming souls are going to acknowledge that and say, hey, okay, like you put your hand up to come first. I'm going to give you that time to get used to being a little human, and then I'll come through. And often in those situations, it does not matter what you do between when you start trying to conceive and when your 5-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old is ready. In my experience, there's very little, if anything, that is going to make that child come any quicker. And so when we can start to understand these things, it can really help then to take that pressure off, or I'm doing something wrong, or why isn't it working, or I'm running out of time, or all of these things. So when you can tune into and tap into a baby's soul, you can really understand their individual needs for their journey ahead, whatever that looks like for them. But yeah, there are lots of different conditions, is maybe too strong a word, but needs that they have to support them with their conception.
Yeah, I think that that's a beautiful perspective and something to really take into consideration, because I know you had mentioned this in the form that you filled out for the podcast. Women put so much pressure on themselves as needing to make it happen by a certain point, one, and two, feeling like it's their burden and like it's their fault, right? Like our
Mm-hmm.
bodies are broken. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times it's not that simple, right? It's not that black and white. So I think when you do
Mm-hmm.
take into consideration, it's not just about you and your partner, or you if you're a solo parent by choice. There's an entire another soul involved in this process. And it's kind of crazy how we don't really even consider their needs and wants and desires really at all. And when you do, just having this conversation with you now, so for anyone who's listening, where it's like, oh my gosh, I've never even thought about that. No blame, no shame at all. This is a relatively new concept to me as well in the last few years, but it's it really kind of can take that pressure off, I feel, of your shoulders. And in almost, I don't know, for me, when I think about it, it helps cultivate a greater level of surrender and trust, and just knowing my baby is here. They want to come in, but they're going to come in at their own right time.
Yeah.
So I feel like I really should have started with this question, but how did you become passionate of this work? I know that you are a registered nurse and now you are a sole communicator to babies. Like, where did that transition come in? I think that that might be helpful to hear that backstory.
Yeah, well, I worked as a registered nurse for over 20 years, and the majority of that time was working in the NICU, so in the intensive care unit for babies. So I saw the worst of birth, I saw everything that could go wrong, and I really struggled emotionally dealing with why some babies could be born at term, happy, healthy, skin to skin on mum's chest, everything great, and then other babies being born at 23 weeks and landing themselves in a NICU for weeks, months on end. And I could not understand that, even though I was very left brained, I was very science focused, show me the evidence, I was wired like that. But none of that, none of my training, none of my experience answered those questions for me. Like, why was this happening? And it wasn't until I stepped out of that environment, I took a bit of a career break, probably for my mental health more than anything. And I went to Africa. And while I was in Africa, I had a near death experience. And when I came back, things started to shift. I started being interested in yoga and meditation, energy healing. I did some like womb work, feminine embodiment type stuff, just studying different modalities. And I was still working as a NICU nurse at this time. And about 3 years, I think it was, after I got back from Africa, my worlds collided. And I literally started the babies I was caring for clinically. I was starting to have these experiences with them. I was starting to see things, beings around their cot. I was starting to feel their energy field, and I was starting to hear things. And I honestly thought I was going crazy because I didn't really believe in that stuff. Like I was, and especially when I was at work, I was in nursing mode, logical left brain science focused mode. So it was really bizarre for me. And I just thought it's just my imagination. I took some time off work thinking too much shift work and not enough sleep. But when I returned to work a couple of weeks later, it just kept happening. And I just started having these experiences with babies, and I mostly ignored it. But then, probably after a year or so, I thought maybe I should start listening to this, because at the end of the day, I still didn't know why babies landed in NICU. I still didn't know why some babies didn't survive. And so, as I started listening and taking note, just with a curiosity, like I'm someone who I'm not just going to believe things just because someone tells me something. Like I'm very much, I have a curious mind, but I like to sit with what feels right for me. But it was only through these experiences, like with these babies, that I noticed my perspectives start to shift, and I started to understand more. There was still the human part of me that still, my heart broke when a baby passed away or a 23 or 24 weeker was born, to shocked parents. Like the human me still very much was connected to that and felt that as I supported these parents and these babies. But I started to have this other perspective, I guess, soften the edges of that, and didn't make it go away, but just helped me to understand it on a different level, from a different perspective that I hadn't considered it before. So everything I've learned, I feel, has been from these babies. Like they've been my teachers. They've been the ones that have taught me all that I know about this sort of work, because nobody taught me, certainly didn't study it at university. And I've now stepped out of the hospital because what I found is that I couldn't share this information with those who needed it most, which was the parents. I look back and I think if I could have shared some of this wisdom with the parents of these babies I was caring for, it could have really softened their journey, not just through NICU, but also once babies had passed away as well. So yeah, so that's kind of it in a nutshell with how I came to be doing this work. It was something that it wasn't expected, it wasn't planned, it just sort of found me, I guess. And now that I've stepped out of the hospital, that connection has really strengthened and deepened with this next, yeah, generation of children and those who are considering a life here as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow, what a beautiful story. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me when someone shares their story and I feel like your reality just completely takes a 180 and totally unintentional. You weren't even like looking for a career change. You just thought you needed a break, traveled, had that near death experience, which clearly had an effect on you,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
probably for obviously a good reason, for then you to now be able to serve this needed purpose, right? For people, because it is really hard to try to figure out, why do some babies make it to term healthy, some do not, some don't
mhm,
make it past a few weeks or a few months. It really is heartbreaking, and our logical minds do want to make sense of it, but we can't, right? So I think
mm-mm.
that this is a beautiful gift that you have, and that you're able to help women and couples and parents and families really help them cope. I have a client who had her daughter, oh gosh, I don't know how early it was, but it was quite early on, before 23 weeks, I believe. And yeah, that little baby, she is fighting and she is holding on. And this client has already been through a lot with the loss of her father the year before. So your mind seems to go like, why? Why does this person have to go through so much right now? But obviously there's a greater reason for that underneath. And
Yeah.
I do feel like some of us are able to come out the other side and realize that's why I went through that. This is what I have learned and gained from that experience. So beautiful
Yeah.
story. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
And yeah, so I know in your form you kind of mentioned babies are autonomous beings. So that's not something that we typically think about or even consider, and that they have their own purpose and things like that. And I know that you talked about that earlier, but if there's anything more that you care to share, or even a story, I don't know if you call them clients, or like a client story of something that you could share about a baby's personal purpose. Using our 4-step restorative fertility framework, we will 1. Reveal the physical and energetic root cause. 2. We will remove the barriers to you conceiving and carrying a pregnancy to term. Number 3, we will rebalance the physical and energetic body with bio-individual strategies. And number 4, receive. You will nourish the mind, body, and spirit so you can receive baby. I have 3 one-on-one spots, and this is for the woman who is ready to claim her fertility back. She's ready to step back into her power. She is ready to do what it takes to finally get pregnant. If you want to learn more about this, find me on Instagram at @the_wellness_pharmacist. My Instagram is going to be in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. I've certainly, yeah, there's lots of stories to share, and I'll definitely touch on that. And what I felt to share first is, yeah, getting back to this idea of the autonomous soul, is that so I think we can wrongly assume that babies, once they're born, and look, in some ways they are a clean slate, and they do have a very high vibrational pure energy. That's generally the nature of a newborn baby, but they bring so much wisdom and so much knowledge and so much energy with them on their journey, so that they don't arrive here as this clueless little being that knows nothing. They come here, like we all do, with wisdom, as a soul, as a soul in spirit who has been around. I don't understand how it all works, but has been around for many, many years. And depending how far you can expand your mind, previous lifetimes, and all of these things as well. And so when we can start to see babies as that they're coming here with all of this wisdom, all of this knowledge, all of this experience, then it can help us to see them in a different light and realize that we cannot control them. And I know we touched on this before, like we cannot control their arrival here on earth. And I always say with women, like we can support them. We can do what we can do from our side of the fence. And that can be anything around energy healing, naturopathy, acupuncture, womb healing, nutrition, like all of these different things that we can do from our side of the fence. And often they will share different things that we can do to support them and help them come to earth. But at the end of the day, that's exactly it. They are the ones that need to make the jump. They need to take the plunge and come to us. We can't go out and pluck them from the ethers and pull them to earth. And I always say to women, we can, as I said, do what we can do, and we're offering them an invitation. We're offering them a life here. We're offering them a vehicle to come to earth through us. And we can't do much more than that, because if a soul is not ready, or if what they need isn't right, then we can't force them. And this is my belief through doing this work, is that we don't have that kind of power over another soul to pull them from spirit to earth if they're not ready. There's so much more, I think, that goes into conception than what we can see. Even when it looks easy, there's still so much that goes in around. There's so many pieces of the puzzle that need to fall into place for a soul to be conceived and to stay. And so I wanted to share, just thinking of a client to share, or like a little case study to share as I was speaking then. And I'm feeling strongly to mention some really common themes around miscarriage, because I know it's something that is very, very common on the conception journey. More than 50% of the women I work with have experienced loss of some sort. And when we can keep in mind the autonomy of these souls who are coming and the energy of Earth at this time, as in everything that's going on. Life is a little bit chaotic down here. It can be quite heavy and dense at times. And so we have these souls coming from a very high vibration in spirit and sort of crash landing here on Earth. It's like that sort of difference, I guess, in the frequency or the energy from soul to human. And so with so many women I work with, and I'm saying this as I could probably count a couple of hundred women easily in this one case study, is like a soul coming to earth and then changing their mind. We see that a lot in miscarriage, that women can think it's, if only I'd done that, or if only I hadn't have done that, or maybe I missed something, or why did I go to the gym that day, or all of these things that we can beat ourselves up for. When we tune in to this soul and say, hey, like, what happened here? What's going on here? Tell us your perspective. And again, there can be many options from here, but the most common one is that I changed my mind. I thought I was ready, but actually I'm not ready. Or actually, I need to come a few times first. And we often see this in recurrent miscarriages. Like, I need to come a few times, like, to, I guess, kind of climatize to the Earth's energy. It's almost like if you get into a hot bath and just you put one foot in and then the other, and then you might kneel down and then the other knee. It's like this gradual process of getting used to the water. And in my experience, it's the same with these babies coming to Earth. If they went from spirit to earth in one foul swoop, it would be way too much for them energetically. And who knows, there's lots of ways that can end up to the point that they just don't do it. So they're like, okay, I'm going to come and I'm just going to stay for a few weeks. I'm going to start to feel what it feels like to be attached to a body. And then I'm going to leave again. And some babies can do that multiple times before they're ready to come to the earth and stay. And so often, especially in the unexplained cases, there's nothing that we could have done from this side of the fence, or anything that we'd done wrong for that outcome to happen. It's often, especially with miscarriage, it's often the baby that decides whether it's energetic, whether it's not the body that they're looking for, whether it can be that the body's not growing correctly, or there is some sort of abnormality there, and they're like, no, I'm going now. There's all sorts of reasons, but what I'd really love to share is that it's not your fault. Like, as I said, it's so far out of our control, that whole coming to earth and staying. And I always say to women, keep coming back to, as you said earlier, like the surrender and the invitation. Literally, all you can do is offer them a space and a place here on earth. And as I said, do what you can do, and the rest is up to them. They need to, just like all of us did. I'm sure there's many of us who were either our own mothers' miscarriages, or even previous generations as well can happen. So sorry, that was probably a lot of information that I just shared then, but yeah, I think it's important information though.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. And I'm sure very helpful for anyone who's listening who has experienced a loss, because there's a lot of questions that come up and a lot of times they're unanswered. So I think that that can bring a level of comfort for sure. And what came to my mind as you were speaking is it's almost like your first debut as a parent. So I have a daughter, she's 5, and between the span of being a baby and 5 years old, there's a lot of things where I have to just, right, step back, let go, and let her do it, right? Try it on her own without my assistance. And I feel like that's exactly what is happening here, right? You said
Mm-hmm.
only do what we can do on our side, and then we're really putting the ball in their court to really show up and do what feels good to them and in that moment. So to me it feels like a real debut at parenting with the specific child. Maybe you already have children at home. So yeah, I think that it's just a real nice level of comfort in knowing that you did everything that you could and it's not your fault, right?
No. And that's all you can do, right? You can only do what you can do. And as I mentioned, like a big part of the soul's autonomy is making that decision.
Mm-hmm.
They need to come to us. We can call them here, we can invite them here, but we can't drag them here if they're not ready for a particular reason. Or and babies too, like this generation in particular, like they want to be allowed to come. They want to be allowed to come so that they can live their life here and have that experience here as a human. They don't want to, and I don't mean this from judgment, but they don't want to be pulled to earth from out of frustration or need or control or anything like that. Like that sort of energy can repel babies. And I see this often where women are trying so hard to fall pregnant that they actually push their baby soul further away. It sort of reminds me of like that like a feather falling from the sky. If you allow it to fall and you have your hand there to catch it, it's just going to fall in its own time. If you try to grasp that feather, it's like the wind of your hand is going to push that feather further away. And that's exactly how I sense the energy of these babies, because they are coming to have their own experience on earth. And I'm a big believer that that if parenthood and motherhood is part of your journey, it will happen in that place of surrender, letting go, going with the flow, focusing on your journey as a human as well, because your sole purpose as a human on this earth is not to bring children into the earth. You're more than that. That may be a part of your journey, and it may take up a lot of your journey for a period of time and years, but they also don't want to come to the earth at the expense of your identity or your journey or your focus or your energy. They want to join you here. They don't want them or their journey to kind of be more important than your own, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very respectful in that way as well. And as I said, too much of that, which is totally understandable when we're focused on something, it's like we become very tunnel visioned about it. And in many ways that's a beautiful thing, that desire. But if it comes out of balance, it can become a blockage to conception. In this context, I guess that we're talking about it, there can be lots of blockages to conception, like physically on all levels, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, energetically as well. But when we're talking about even just that desire for a child, it's so important to try to keep that in balance, because they don't want to be our sole focus, or they don't want to play that role for us. Again, coming back to them being empowered, autonomous, they just don't want to play that role for us here on earth, which can be hard when it's your focus and what you want. It can be hard to step back, but I find that stepping back is actually what allows them to move closer. Because again, it's about them being able to come to us and join us, like journey with us, rather than, again, any sort of force or pressure to come at a particular time as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I'm really hearing you say, and I've had women speak this directly to me, is they feel that having a child is what will bring them fulfillment. And that's a lot of pressure to put on the baby. So I
Mhm.
often help coach my clients like we have to find fulfillment outside of being a parent and having a baby,
Yeah,
right? Because like you said, we're
yeah,
all here for a purpose and we can evolve and all of these things. So yeah, being able to feel fulfilled and happy without the child and the baby. Obviously, they'll bring more of that, but not
yeah,
finding your soul fulfillment just from that. So, yeah, that's
yeah.
beautiful. So I'm just curious, let's say I'm someone who's been trying to get pregnant. I've been struggling. Maybe I've experienced a loss, maybe not. and I want to work with you, what would that look like if you're able to bring us through what either a session would look like or what it looks like to work with a baby soul communicator?
Yeah, so I do offer one-on-one and also group sessions as well. I work mostly with doing baby and child soul readings. So if someone comes to me, like who you mentioned, who was trying to conceive, things weren't working, often I see women who have been on their journey for a long time. Often there's nothing wrong physically. There may or may not be, but a lot of the time there isn't. It's unexplained. Then what we would do is we would set up a session and then we meet either over Zoom or I do them remotely as well. And where you can ask questions. And what I do is I spend time before the session tuning in, anywhere from like 20 to 30 minutes before the session, tuning in. And I always ask, okay, are there any baby souls around this woman who are planning a journey here on earth in this lifetime? Again, if we get into different lives, we're not interested in souls who are looking 300 years down the track. Like, we want to know what's happening now. This is to make sure that we're communicating with those souls who are planning at this time. We also want to know, part of that is I'm very intentional around those who are looking for, I'm not even looking for that, they have a degree of commitment as well. Because, and I think this is where, not to judge other psychics, but what I have found with women who have said, oh, but a psychic told me I had 4 babies around me, that can often happen, but we need to know why they're there. So that's what I do. I'm like, let's tune in, see who's there, and then we want to know why they're there. Are they planning a life here? Are they just being a sticky beak and they're just wanting to have a look and see what's going on? Have they been a child in a previous life? Are they looking at future lives? All of these different things. So we tap in and find that out first. And I'm just very intentional and very clear around who we're going to communicate with. And then we find out what their plan is. So if a woman's trying to conceive, we can go into timing, but I always say to hold timing loosely. I think there can be a misconception that babies know exactly when they're going to conceive, exactly which month. Some babies do, but increasingly they don't, because they're all about, I can sense like different conception portals or windows is how it feels to me, where it's okay in November, like that energy feels good for you and for this child for conception. And then we'll get to November and then it's like the baby will kind of reassess and it's okay, well, what's going on now? What's happening? What's the energy like? What's going on in the world, relationship, all of these different things, and then make a decision. And if they decide that that's not the right time, then we can look at other conception windows as well. And then we can find out if there's anything like physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically that women need to perhaps work through or address. These babies are teaching us well before conception. They are incredible teachers, like this generation of children and those who are coming in the future, where they're teaching us self-reflection. They're really calling us to not be perfect or be completely healed, but to really step up and into our healing journey and looking at ourselves and self-reflection. And sometimes that can be like through energy work or womb work or therapy, even like dealing with traumas, learning to emotionally regulate, all of these things that they may need us to be able to teach them when they get here on earth. They can start to teach us before. And then we also go into, how sometimes how they want to be conceived. Some are particular about where they want to be conceived. Others, I've even had one baby soul ask for that they didn't like the energy of that house and for their parents to move house. Thankfully, it was already on their radar and they were just thinking about maybe like selling up and moving. I think it was like interstate in the US from memory. So those sorts of information that can come through. And I guess what it does is it can help to shed some light onto some of these either things that were maybe felt by the woman, but they were unsure about, or things that may not have even been on her radar, to be able to support or shift or even acknowledge in some ways. And then always allow time for, if there's any questions that she has. Often as we go through all of this information, like more questions go up. That's why Zoom is good, because we have that live two-way street where we can chat. And we can also go into the 6 Ps that I call them, or topics that we can really find out from these souls who are coming. So if that's something that the woman is open to, I always check first. We can find out, when we look into past lives, we can find out different connections or karmic energy around parents. Sometimes a baby might be more connected to one parent because they've had more, say, a previous past life with that parent, and that can offer a lot of insight. 2 is the personality. So when I tune into a baby's soul, I always feel their energy, which usually feels masculine or feminine, but that doesn't always correlate with biological sex. It's more about the energy of that soul, which will often translate to personality. So we can find out about whether they're sort of a stronger soul or perhaps a little bit more reserved, their social nature, how they interact with others, whether they're serious, light, fun, sensitive, all of those things, to find out more about their personality. The third one is their purpose. So it's my belief and experience that we do come to Earth for a reason or reasons. It doesn't have to be one great big magical purpose. We often have multiple individually, but sometimes that involve other people as well for the collective. So souls will often share why they're coming, and that can also give some insight into what they're here to teach or what they're here to learn here on Earth as well. The fourth one is perspectives. So as we've been talking about today, like the spirit world sees conception very different to what we do here on Earth. And they also see things without our human filters, where we have a lot of rules and beliefs and conditioning and filters around, and emotion around conception, for example. Whereas my experience of soul and spirit are a lot more matter of fact, a lot more direct, blunt, and a lot less emotionally attached than what we are. So they can offer these different perspectives that can just help to, I guess, bite through that noise or get through that noise. The fifth one is possibilities. And that's, again, it's my belief and experience that we do come to Earth with different things we may need to work on or different purposes. But it's also my belief that not everything is set in stone. So I think if everything was set in stone from the minute we took our first breath to the minute we took our last, then really what's the point in coming? So the way I see it and the way these babies share it is they come with themes or topics, and there can be some events that are planned because it's a big part of their purpose. But mostly what I see are timelines. So it's a little bit like the branches of a tree. And so sometimes the branches can be thin, sometimes they can be thick, sometimes they can join into another branch. So it basically offers the different possibilities for what may happen in any given moment. But I stay away from prediction because I don't believe it's possible to predict with 100% accuracy exactly what's going to happen, because the majority of the time, well, all the time, even the babies themselves don't know and can't know until things actually unfold. And then the last one is parenting tips. So they can offer from their place in spirit, they can offer, and young children too will come through as well and offer very clear and specific ways to, like, how we can support them. So how we can create the best conditions to conceive them, but also how we can parent them here on Earth, which can take out some of the guesswork of trying to understand them and trying to figure out what they need. And instead, we can allow a baby or a child's soul to guide you as their parent directly from the horse's mouth. So, yeah, that was a really long answer. But yeah, when we're doing like a reading or a session, these are the sorts of things that we can explore.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I think for anyone who is just really struggling and could use some hope and inspiration and just a level of comfort, I think that that could be really, really helpful. So thank you for sharing. And I know you have one freebie and one offer for the audience. So 44 questions your baby soul can answer, and then a special offer as well. So I'll let you share about that with the listeners.
Sure. So the first one is my freebie, which is 44 questions your baby's soul can answer to bring peace and comfort to wherever you are on your motherhood journey. And so that's for women who are trying to conceive, including IVF. IVF is a whole other theme around with babies, pregnancy loss, also pregnancy birth, and then once babies are born, earthside, and children as well, like right up into the teenage years I work with. So yeah, so that freebie it gives you some insights into the types of questions that you can ask and the types of answers that these babies and children can give, especially if this is something that is new to you, that you haven't heard of it before. Maybe you're a little bit skeptical, and I'm my own biggest skeptic, so I think skepticism is very healthy. But that just can give you some insight into the types of information that can come through. And then the offer that I have, which will be available for the next 30 days, is a $25 off a baby soul reading. So that is just for the distant readings, which I can do remotely, where I tune in remotely. You have the opportunity to send in your questions. I'll tune in, receive all the information, and then send that to you in a PDF document via email. Or the other option for the $25 off is to do a reading over Zoom, where you can also share your questions, which I'll tune into before we start, and then obviously questions backwards and forwards, as many as we can fit into the hour if that's what you need. So yeah, so those will be $25 off for the next 30 days.
Amazing. And the links for those will be in the show notes. And please let the listeners know where they can find you, connect with you, and learn more.
Sure. Well, my website is bornenergy.com.au. So Born Energy is my business name. And you can find me on Instagram at born_energy. I am on Facebook, but mostly you'll find me on Instagram.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Lauren. It was a really mind-opening and just inspiring conversation to have for women and couples to know that this is an option that is available to them to support them on their journey, because I'm sure this is a newer concept for some.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. Thanks for creating this platform to really help support women on their conception and fertility journey. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast. If this episode resonated with you or gave you an aha moment, stop what you're doing right now and write a review. This simple act of kindness helps me get this podcast out to connect with as many women as I possibly can. I also have a special offer. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I will take $250 off one of my premium coaching containers. Let me know what resonated with you the most and why. So connect with me in my free Facebook community or tag me on Instagram. You'll find both listed below. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you next time.